At 6 p.m. on June 10, 2025, Anthony Floyd Wainwright walked his final steps down a sterile hallway. The state of Florida ended his life by lethal injection after 31 years on death row. This concluded a story that began in 1994 with the brutal murder of Carmen Gayhart, a young mother killed by two escaped convicts in a crime so vicious that a judge called it extremely wicked, evil, and vile. After 3 decades on death row, Wainwright spoke his final words. He did not confess. He did not apologize to the family he destroyed. Instead, he maintained his innocence to the very end. The crime that shocked Florida. April 27, 1994. Lake City, Florida. Carmen Gayhart, just 23 years old, was a nursing student with everything to live for. She was a devoted mother to 2 young children, working hard to build a better future. That evening, she made a routine stop at the Winn-Dixie supermarket, picking up groceries before heading to collect her children from daycare. Death was waiting in the parking lot. Just days earlier, 2 dangerous men had escaped from a North Carolina prison. Anthony Floyd Wainwright and Richard Eugene Hamilton were career criminals, violent men with nothing left to lose. They had stolen a Cadillac, armed themselves with guns, and embarked on a crime spree that took them across state lines. Their stolen vehicle had overheated in Lake City, leaving them stranded and desperate. A mother's final shopping trip. As she loaded groceries into her Ford Bronco, the 2 escaped convicts approached. At gunpoint, they forced Carmen into her own vehicle. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated, cold-blooded abduction by 2 predators. Carmen was on her way to pick up her children who waited in vain. Men drove Carmen to a remote area in Hamilton County. What they did to her was almost too horrific to describe. They raped her, they tortured her, they strangled her with their bare hands. Then they shot her twice in the back of the head. Carmen Gayhart was left dead in the Florida wilderness. Her life, cut short at 23, ended in unimaginable terror. The manhunt and shootout. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies across multiple states were mobilizing. The escape from North Carolina had triggered alerts, but now they had a kidnapping, rape, and murder on their hands. The stolen Cadillac, the stolen Bronco, the timeline of movements. Investigators were piecing together a trail of violence that stretched across the Southeast. The manhunt intensified when Wainwright and Hamilton continued their crime spree, driving Carmen's stolen Bronco toward Mississippi. They were armed, dangerous, and had already proven they would kill without hesitation. Every law enforcement officer in the region knew these men had nothing left to lose. On April 28, 1994, just 1 day after Carmen's murder, justice caught up with them in Brookhaven, Mississippi. But these weren't men who would surrender quietly. The confrontation erupted into a violent shootout that would be remembered for decades. Wainwright and Hamilton, cornered and desperate, opened fire on police officers. The gunfight was fierce, bullets flying in broad daylight as the 2 killers made their last stand. But this time, the good guys won. Both men were captured alive, though not without a fight. Partners in crime turned on each other. In custody, the 2 partners in crime quickly turned on each other. This is where the story took a particularly chilling turn, because it revealed the true nature of these men. Not just killers, but cowards who would betray even each other to save their own skins. Anthony Wainwright initially admitted to authorities that he and Hamilton had kidnapped, robbed, and raped Carmen Gayhart. But when it came to the murder itself, Wainwright pointed the finger squarely at his partner. He claimed it was Hamilton who strangled Carmen. He claimed it was Hamilton who pulled the trigger, firing those 2 fatal shots into the back of her head. Hamilton told a different story. He insisted that while they had both participated in the kidnapping and rape, it was Wainwright who had killed her. 2 killers, 2 versions of the truth, and a dead woman who could never speak for herself. The trial and death sentence. The case went to trial in 1995, and the evidence was overwhelming. Both men were clearly guilty of kidnapping, rape, and murder. But the question of who actually killed Carmen became crucial in determining who would face the death penalty. Prosecutors presented a devastating case. Fellow prisoners came forward to testify that Wainwright had admitted in jail that he was the shooter. Physical evidence linked both men to the crime scene. The timeline was clear, the motive was clear, and the brutality was undeniable. In the end, a Hamilton County jury found Anthony Wainwright guilty of first-degree murder, robbery, kidnapping, and sexual battery, all committed with a firearm. They recommended death, and the judge agreed. Richard Hamilton received life in prison. Wainwright was sentenced to die. Decades on death row. For 31 years, Anthony Wainwright sat on Florida's death row, filing appeal after appeal, seeking delay after delay. Carmen's family waited 3 decades for justice, watching as the legal system slowly ground through its processes while their loved one remained buried and their children grew up without their mother. During those decades, Wainwright's partner in crime, Richard Hamilton, lived out his life sentence until he died in prison in January 2023. He took his version of the truth to the grave, leaving Wainwright as the sole surviving perpetrator of one of Florida's most heinous crimes. The death warrant was signed. On May 10, 2025, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed Anthony Wainwright's death warrant. After decades of legal maneuvering, the appeals had been exhausted. The courts had spoken. The time for delays was over. Wainwright, now 54 years old, was scheduled to die by lethal injection on June 10, 2025, at Florida State Prison in Stark. Even as the execution date approached, Wainwright's attorneys made desperate last-minute attempts to save his life. They appealed to the Florida Supreme Court, arguing various legal technicalities, claiming new evidence, seeking any possible avenue to delay the inevitable. But the courts had heard these arguments before. The evidence was clear, the conviction was solid, and the sentence was just. Carmen Gayhart deserved justice, and her family deserved closure. One by one, the appeals were denied. The legal system that had protected Wainwright's rights for 3 decades had finally reached its conclusion. There were no more stays, no more delays, no more hope. The final hours. In his final days, what went through the mind of this condemned man? Wainwright knew exactly when he would die, down to the very day. He knew that in a matter of hours he would be strapped to a gurney, needles inserted into his arms, and deadly chemicals pumped into his bloodstream. Did he think about Carmen Gayhart? Did he remember her face from that terrible day in 1994? Did he feel remorse for the life he took, the children he orphaned, the family he destroyed? Or was he still the same cold-blooded killer who showed no mercy to an innocent young mother? The staff at Florida State Prison completed their final preparations. The execution team was briefed. The chemicals were prepared. The witnesses were notified. Everything was ready for June 10, 2025. Execution Day. On the day of execution, Wainwright spent his final hours in a holding cell near the death chamber. He was offered a final meal. He chose a simple hamburger and fries, his appetite apparently unaffected by what awaited him. Some killers feast before they die. Others can't stomach the thought of food. He met with a spiritual advisor, though he showed little interest in seeking forgiveness for his unforgivable acts. Some condemned men find God in their final hours. Others remain defiant to the end, refusing to acknowledge the pain they've caused. At the appointed time, guards escorted him to the execution chamber. The room was small, sterile, and clinical. The gurney awaited, leather straps ready to secure his arms and legs. Witnesses watched through a window as justice was finally served. His final words. When asked for his final statement, Anthony Wainwright spoke briefly to the assembled witnesses. He did not confess to the murder of Carmen Gayhart. He did not apologize to her family, who watched from the witness room. Instead, he maintained his innocence to the very end, claiming he was not the one who pulled the trigger 31 years ago. His last words were, "I didn't kill that woman. Richard Hamilton did. I'm going to my death for something I didn't do." With that, the execution proceeded. At 6:18 p.m. on June 10, 2025, Anthony Floyd Wainwright was pronounced dead. Justice served. The story of Anthony Wainwright and Carmen Gayhart was about choices. Carmen chose to be a devoted mother and student, striving for a better life, while Wainwright chose violence and crime, leading him to death row. Those choices reached their conclusion on June 10, 2025. Carmen's legacy lives on in her children and the memories of those who loved her, affirming that innocent lives matter and deserve justice. Wainwright's legacy is marked by his crimes and the ultimate punishment he faced. Justice may be slow, but it is not forgotten. After 31 years, Carmen finally received justice, and Wainwright paid for his actions. The countdown ended, and now it is all over. What this means. The execution of Anthony Wainwright closed a chapter that began in 1994 with the brutal murder of Carmen Gayhart. Whether he was the actual trigger man or merely an accomplice in a crime that escalated to murder, both he and Hamilton were responsible for Carmen's death through their participation in the kidnapping and rape. The jury made its decision, upheld by the courts for 31 years. In the end, Wainwright chose to maintain his innocence rather than accept responsibility for his role in the crime that cost an innocent woman her life. Closing thoughts. That's the story of Anthony Wainwright's execution and final words. What do you think about his refusal to confess? Was justice served, or should he have received a life sentence instead? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more insights into true crime cases. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our coverage of shocking cases and the justice that follows.